So here at Peninsula's dual venue setup, we have multiple different ways that we can process audio. The first way we have this set up is so that the youth or just general population could use this very easily. So if somebody has an event in here who needs just a quick video or something like that simple, in order to operate the simpler version of the system, we will simply press on this touchpad. And then when you see here, sound system power on, you tap that. Now this is a repeatable button, so if you press this, it will load you back to default, right? So if I turn the volume up and load this, this is a preset, so it will turn your volume back on. So you only need to turn this on once. Once it is on, you then have your microphones, your computer, and various other tabs if you need to go through in order to reach other inputs. These inputs would be locations on the stage or just direct control of specific elements of your system. And then down here, all the way at the bottom, we have the mix in which you can control your mains and your subs. The monitor is not particularly used. Now that is for the simple setup. This is intended for anybody to be able to use. However, we right beside it have our SQ5 setup. So, first thing that I'm going to do before I change anything is that I'm going to come to the touchpad and I'm going to make sure that the system is powered off. This works just the same way. As soon as I tap it, everything goes off. So what we have here is a special connection system that we've derived in order to make sure that you can quickly swap between the two systems. The current status is that the stage box is routed into the AHM. Both of these are back in the amp rack. The SQ5 S-Link and the SQ5 Gig Ace don't actually need to be connected to each other while we are in the simple setup version. We do this simply so that you don't lose the cable. In order to swap to the SQ5 setup, we will change things so that 1 is routed to 1 and 2 is routed to 2. This sends the SQ5 S-Link to the stage box and the SQ5 Gig Ace to the AHM connection. Very easy to swap. With the connection made in this configuration, we are ready to start using the SQ5. So at this point, it's actually pretty simple. You'll come back to the back of the SQ5 and turn the system on. So we've turned the SQ5 on, but we actually still need to use the touchpad. Even though you will not be using the IP8 element of the system, we do need to ensure that the system is powered on the same way through using the touchpad. With all of our devices active, our connection made, we simply need to log in to the SQ5. On here, we have the admin user, log in. We are now completely ready to go. You can actually operate the entire system purely off of the SQ5. So while the IP8 is still connected, it's not in control. At this point, you're ready to go for a Sunday. When you're done with your Sunday service and you want to go back to just your general setup so that, again, anybody, whether it be youth or anybody else, attempts to use this system, you want to first power down your SQ5 console. In order to power down the SQ5, we first need to come to any of the processing tabs. Even if you're in a tab, you can press out of it, and then ensure that you're on this home screen in which you can see power shut down the desk, continue, and you tap yes. At this point, it'll begin shutting down, and it'll say it is now safe to turn off, at which point you press the power button on the back. With the system powered down, we will now come back to our cable setup down here, and we will ensure that we are set back to the simple setup routing. And just like that, our routing is complete. We are ready to go with just the touchpad and IP8 system. In the event that anything needs changed, so perhaps you need a different preset setup on your AHM, or just need to alter your routing in some manner, we have the AHM System Manager and the Custom Control Editor both on this computer. This can be done in any way. It just needs to ensure that this is on the same network as your AHM and your IP8 and any touchpad you happen to use. So let's say you misplace that touchpad, you can then use it with the computer connected to the same network. So in order to use the AHM software, the first thing that I'll do is actually turn Wi-Fi off on this computer. That's just the way this setup is currently handled. Then I'll open the AHM System Manager. And when we look at the recent units, we'll see the AHM32 is actually already at the top for us. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And at this point, we are now connected directly to the AHM in the amp rack. We'll look in under Configure. In the event that for whatever reason the AHM needs to be reset or restarted, we can, under this configure tab, go into the network setting, at which point we can see this button here that says restart unit. This will actually cycle power on the unit itself, so we don't have to worry about going back to manually unplug and replug the AHM. And then just click restart unit, and then you'll see this green box, click OK. We don't need to restart it right now, so I won't. And then if we need to alter anything that involves the presets themselves, which we have established, these are the buttons that when we press power on the touchpad or power off, those are actually loading presets. So if we need to edit those presets, we'll come to the AHM System Manager, click on Manage, and all of those presets are here. So you can actually see that full access on is currently the preset that we are using to power things on. And then general use off will actually is what is being used when we click off on the touchpad. These presets can have their recall scope altered in any way similar to a DLAV, a SQ5, Avantis, any of these systems. It all operates in essentially the same manner. And then if we want to change our actual inputs, so this would be when we are editing our presets, if we want to change the input volume or routing or things like that within it, we'll come in here to channels, and then you have all of your control that you need. So EQ can be done here, and then we have zones set up here, and all of your routing is done through the XPoint routing. Control groups we have set up so that you can simplify your faders. So if you find that you want to use this such as a similar method to DCA groups, they're not exactly the same, then you could use this in order to achieve a similar setup. But for right now, we really mainly just need this to control a master volume and then alter a couple things like our computer stage setup. And here in your I/O patch bay, you really shouldn't ever have to change anything. Even if we're swapping between our SQ5 and our AHM setup, it's actually all configured so that when you make the cable swap, you don't need to alter anything within your routing. And just as the last thing that you may want to change within the AHM software, we have the IP8 controls here, and every single element of the IP8, whether it be these buttons up here, which we are currently not using in your setup, you can manipulate those to be anything that you want them to be. So now let's say that for whatever reason, the touchpad is no longer available for this room. If you want to access the same level of preset loading that the touchpad uses, then we can simply use the custom control app on the computer itself. This icon here is the custom control app, and then we'll log into this the same way that you would log in on the touchpad. So for this scenario, the profile that we will be using is called band. Again, there's no password for this, it's just knowing the username band. We'll hit connect, and at this point, we actually see a direct replication of the touchpad's interface. These buttons will load the presets the exact same way that your touchpad loads them. And finally, in the event that you need to change the application itself, so let's say the custom control app has a power on button, but you want 2 power on buttons, or you want one that will change to a different preset for a different group of people. In order to do that, you will come into the custom control editor. And at this point, the easiest way to do this is actually to download the config from the unit, or you can load the config from the drive. We have the profile saved already, but just for this example, we'll show how downloading for the config from the unit works. With the download complete, you'll be greeted with this interface, which shows you that the device that we're connected to is the AHM32, but we'll come into the layout manager and you can see we actually have multiple different layouts here because we had some different ideas we were going to experiment with in the past. Any edits that you may need to make can be done through details, and you can edit, for example, what profile is loaded within the AHM, what presets you have access to, etc. The custom control editor kind of gives it all away in its name. You can create this to be any kind of setup that you want it to be. Any kind of fader. It doesn't have to be buttons, it could be whatever you want it to be. So with that, you have full control over your entire setup here. Anything you want it to be, could be yours.